This video is brought to you by Ground News. Stick around to hear more about the special discount they're offering to the entire upper echelon community. Okay, let me start with this. TikTok is a malignant force in Western society. It's dealing widespread psychological damage to modern teenagers, yet from a political perspective, it's clearly just a partisan pawn. Some people might look at the recent efforts to ban the service and think, well, how could that possibly be true? But by the end of the video, if I do my job correctly, that is, I'll have demonstrated that very few people at a policy-making level actually care about the danger, damage, or impacts of TikTok, because what they really care about, at least in America, is shallow contrarian opposition. Nothing more. Well, maybe also profit. Here's a little bit of channel background before I get started. The two most popular videos I've ever produced were about TikTok. One of them centered on the idea that TikTok is rapidly decreasing our attention spans with a reinforcing feedback loop, because decreased attention span makes users even more susceptible to the effects of social media, which in this case is itself decreasing their attention span. And the other was about the live streaming section of the platform, where underage teenagers were very often engaging in explicit behavior for the purpose of receiving real money tips. Tens of millions of TikTok accounts are suspended per quarter, by the way, on the basis that they are suspected to be underage, under 13 in this case, not 18, which compounds the problem of TikTok being detrimental to a developing brain, aka a pox on Western society. With that in mind, it's not really surprising that a TikTok ban was widely favorable to the American public at one point in time. Not just favorable, by the way, overwhelmingly supported at more than a 2-to-1 ratio, according to Pew Research in 2023, with 50% of responses in agreement that the service should be suspended by the government, while only 22% were opposed. What's interesting, however, is that the level of support for this ban since 2023 and before has been falling. 50% support became 38%, then falling to 32% by the end of 2024, which is important for us to keep in the back of our minds as we continue through the video. Support for the ban may have started at a tremendously high level, but by late 2024, it was approaching dead even. Still, even if public support for the ban was falling back to a dead heat, the actual danger of TikTok has been pretty much omnipresent since the application became popular, which is why there was a ban on the table in the first place, initially put forward by Donald Trump, using an executive order in 2020. August 6th, to be very precise, of 2020. I have to use an archive for this because the original is gone for some reason, which is weird to me. Maybe that's because it got overturned, but even then, I think this kind of thing should stay up for posterity, regardless of whether or not it gets shut down. But anyway, August 6th of 2020, the executive order on addressing the threat posed by TikTok gets signed, which reads, quote, I, Donald J. Trump, President of the United States of America, find that additional steps must be taken to deal with the national emergency with respect to the information and communications technology and services supply chain declared in Executive Order 13873 of May 15, 2019. After that, further down, specifically the spread in the United States of mobile applications developed and owned by companies in the People's Republic of China continues to threaten the national security, foreign policy, and economy of the United States, strong words. At this time, action must be taken to address the threat posed by one mobile application, in particular, TikTok, end quote. That right there is Trump initiating an effort to ban TikTok, with further clarifications that the company should be sold to United States proxy. And Trump was quite vocal about this, actually, repeatedly bragging about and taking credit for the ban all over national media. Have a look for yourself.
When I wanted to disable TikTok 3 years ago, I was met with opposition from rhinos, Democrats, and everyone else. They actually went to court in an effort to stop me. We gave them until September 15th. After that, they got to close shop. Okay? That's TikTok.
TikTok is one thing that we're doing, and we just, I don't know, maybe I would have done that anyway. I don't know. It could have been affected by this.
There was also a particular focus on the idea of profit. The U.S. should be paid. He said things like substantial amounts of money should be coming to the U.S. Treasury. But simultaneously, at the time, left-leaning media outlets appeared to be opposing the effort, calling it a dangerous precedent for democracy. Not that it's unexpected, but even when something good is being done or attempted in this country, the simple fact that the other party are the ones doing it leads to just embarrassing brain-dead levels of knee-jerk opposition. Given that the entire subject of the video today is government inconsistency, and also considering the fact that we're in a full-blown partisan media slap fight right now, I want to take a minute to highlight one of the tools that I use for making videos, which is also helpful in terms of general media literacy. Ground News is probably best classified as an aggregate service, gathering up all sorts of mainstream and independent news sources into a single feed. It provides as much information as possible to readers, also giving bias ratings and clarifying corporate ownership, which allows you to compare article headlines and overall content between different outlets. I've done a whole due diligence package on them, by the way, the same way that I would when a company has done something wrong. And they also publish a great deal of transparency information themselves, which is one of the reasons, there's a few, but this is one of the big reasons, why I actually chase them to be a sponsor of the videos as opposed to the other way around. On the subject of TikTok, as an example, with the most recent executive order delaying the ban of it, they have over 300 articles so far in their feed, some of them with unique observations and data points, which is valuable because no one in the world is surfing 300 different news websites for any given story in order to have a complete picture. With Ground News, you just need the one. Now, what you make of that information, obviously, that part's up to you. Media polarizes people worse and worse these days, so I find that having a top-down view of these news stories from all over the political and geographic spectrum is much more valuable than falling into an echo chamber on any particular individual side. There's a variety of other tools available on the website as well, like blind spot coverage or personal bias checkers, but for whatever reason you decide, if you click the link down below in the description or scan the QR code to sign up, you'll get 40% off the Vantage plan today. Again, link down below, ground.news/echelon for 40% off a Vantage plan today. Big thank you to Ground News for sponsoring the channel. Back to it. Any large move like this being an executive order to ban a massively popular social media application that's worth billions of dollars, any move like that will be the subject of scrutiny, legal scrutiny. So the executive order obviously began facing challenges and regulatory hurdles. Most notable, 2 federal judges halted the ban, which left it mostly dead in the water right at the tail end of the Trump presidency. Well, that was 2020, December of 2020 for the second action, which meant that right around the corner came a new administration under Joe Biden, who decided in mid-2021 that they wanted to revoke and replace the TikTok ban with an approach that was described by some legal experts as trolling. Quote from the New York Times, "The order is the first significant step Mr. Biden has taken to approach the saga between TikTok and the Trump administration, which tried to ban the app over national security concerns, but was immediately challenged in federal court." Further down, "It's a bit of a troll to the Trump administration approach," said Brian J. Fleming, a lawyer who focuses on national security and international trade matters, which was exposed in court as being a bit of a hollow process that was completely outcome-driven, end quote. Whatever political side you personally support, by the way, is totally irrelevant. From a legal perspective, this was an effort to do something that the prior administration had also attempted to do, while stamping their name on it as a better version. Make sense? Flash forward 2024, Biden signs a new law this time stating TikTok will be banned unless it is sold within a year. Important to note, this was not an executive order. This came through Congress, which is a much more significant process in my view compared to the unilateral and consistently expanding authority of presidential executive orders. I don't like the idea of one person slamming out mandates for the entire country, regardless of who sits in the chair. But this new TikTok ban was also tucked away inside a foreign aid package, which is a strange way to get things passed. That is, attaching them to things that are completely unrelated in the first place. So take that for what you will. Important detail. The law provided the ability for the deadline to be extended by 90 days if, and only if, it was believed that ByteDance had made significant progress towards a sale. However, with that in mind, ByteDance themselves have directly and openly stated that they do not have any plans to sell the service. They said this after the sell or ban order was signed in 2024, so we can speculate about whether or not they're just negotiating and playing hardball, but so far, they're not. They've been fairly consistent across the board with the idea that the application will not be sold, and that if forced to choose between a nationwide ban or sale to a US proxy, they will choose the ban. Still, almost 1 year later, the Supreme Court chooses to uphold the incoming ban, resulting in a full shutdown of TikTok services in the United States immediately before Trump takes office again, like 1 day before he takes office. However, even though this would seem to be the culmination of an effort he himself started back in 2020, 1 day after Trump takes office, he signs a new executive order preventing the TikTok ban from being enforced for 75 days, while the CEO attends his inauguration ceremony. Except There's no credible or public indication whatsoever that TikTok is any closer to a sale agreement, nor that they will now consider one. They might, I don't have a crystal ball here, but it's not like they're neck deep in some sort of existing buyout agreement right now. There's a bunch of vultures circling, throwing offers around and trying to get the financing, some of them pathetic jokes like Mr. Beast apparently trying so desperately to overextend himself and be taken seriously, like he's a big boy player. But this is decidedly not an extension that facilitates a deal in progress. ByteDance doesn't seem like they're ever going to sell. Think about all of it now with context, only this time let's try to be as objective as possible, okay? Political party number one. Let's not even use names. This isn't us versus them, right? Tribalism is the entire problem right now. And whatever side perceives themselves to be the subject of criticism will just frantically devolve into whataboutism against their opposition. It's really, really pathetic. So, yeah, political party number one, with no names, with resounding support from the country's actual people, implements an attempted ban on TikTok. That ban, which would require that the company be sold off to some sort of United States proxy, faces significant headwinds immediately, ultimately stalling out just before the finish line because of federal judge rulings. And political party number two, after winning their election, comes into power, overturning the original attempted ban and implementing their own version of it, which is practically identical and is described by legal experts as trolling their opponents. Ban attempt number two, after being upheld by the Supreme Court and also giving a 1-year courtesy period for the company to be sold off to a United States proxy, just like their predecessors had wanted, finally comes into effect right at the very end of when political party number two holds power. And then political party number one, who proposed and attempted the ban from the very beginning, comes back into power and immediately undoes it, extending the time frame, now taking credit for saving TikTok by extending the deadline on the ban, which supposedly both parties have been attempting by literally just undoing each other's efforts for the past half decade. Tell me with a straight face that's not a fucking carnival. When asked about the move in a press conference, Trump had this to say.
Tell you what, every rich person has called me about TikTok.
You wanted to block TikTok. Why did you change your mind?
Because I got to use it. And remember, TikTok is largely about kids, young kids. If China's going to get information about young kids, I don't know.
Are you
I think,
Chinese?
to be honest with you, I think we have bigger problems than that.
That's alarming, at least to me, because TikTok is profoundly damaging for young minds. It's not just about the implication of Chinese data harvesting or general surveillance, which are also bad, by the way. It's about the mental health of our own people. I'll spare everyone the tedium of reading it all, but let me just do a sort of daisy chain here with scientific research. Social media usage as a result of intended design heavily preys on dopamine, activating the same regions of the brain as hard drugs. When studying those effects, a platform like Instagram clearly displays that type of danger. But similar to drugs, unfortunately, not all platforms are equal. TikTok, by comparison, is notably worse than Instagram, which is already bad by itself, emphasizing feelings of time distortion, anxiety, and proneness to boredom, which could, quote, cause greater negative outcomes, end quote. I don't typically do this because I think it's very easy to find everything that I talk about in the videos for yourself if you want to, but I will link all of this stuff down below for anyone who wants to read it. My point is, much like drugs themselves, which are split into various categories with different levels of severity and negative consequences, social media platforms can be looked at in a similar way. Maybe Instagram or Twitter is cocaine, but then TikTok would be meth. And when we're talking about the dangers of a social media platform, from surveillance to data harvesting, even psychological damage, especially at a young age, the idea that it's just the kids, so who cares, is insane levels of detached, when the country historically supported a ban at more than a 2-to-1 ratio, and both political parties have been jousting and hindering each other while trying to take credit for it, it seems, across 3 continuous administrations. It's not a fun topic, I understand that, but watching America twist and contort itself right now with absolutely no shame or ideological consistency, I wanted to take some time and outline the carnival of the TikTok ban, because it's a subject I've been watching extremely closely for the better part of 10 years, as the platform wreaks havoc on the minds of 63% of America's youth now. And because of team sports politics, people are rejoicing at the fact that TikTok was apparently saved by the same person who kicked off the entire effort to ban it in the first place. I live in a circus, and I'm surrounded by clowns. On that note, actually, here's something that really is funny. Because of this TikTok ban, as it came into effect briefly, American TikTok users began flooding into another application, Xiaohongshu, I think it's called, also known as Red Note, with a literal translation being Little Red Book, as in Chairman Mao's Little Red Book, which is purely a Chinese application, mostly designed as an answer to Instagram. Well, think of it this way. If the concern over TikTok is that a Chinese company is gathering data on American citizens, having hundreds of thousands of Americans now willingly sign up for an even more obvious Chinese data collection platform, where the terms of service explicitly require, quote, users practice the core values of socialism as well as promote it and spread the correct view of history, that probably isn't the answer. And it's even funnier because China already has a policy for quite some time where they block Western social media applications themselves, specifically to prevent social mingling. By banning TikTok, even for like a day, America drove hundreds of thousands of people into Red Note, which, 2-for-1, messed with the efforts of both the American and Chinese governments as the TikTok brain rot kids began flooding the platform, many of them getting suspended in the process, considering it's basically a meme in this country to talk about Tiananmen Square, knowing that the Chinese government aggressively tries to censor it wherever possible. People do it all the time in video games, especially. Or they talk about Tibet, or the Uyghur genocide, or Taiwan being a country, etc., etc. And then they start complaining about how there's so much censorship on Red Note compared to the Americanized version of TikTok, which they came from. Yes, there is. They censor LGBTQ stuff and politics and everything else because free speech doesn't exist. No shit. In the end, it's a carnival from start to finish. What began as an attempted ban by one administration morphed into pretty much the exact same thing by the next one, and then it gets overturned by the first one as it's finally about to happen, coming back into power as the refugees who are fleeing the platform that would have been banned defeat the entire purpose of that ban by going to a straight up Chinese version. Like I said, it's an actual carnival. That's it. If you want to support the channel, please check out the links down below. The video sponsor, of course, Ground News, a special VPN deal, locals and Patreon, monthly memberships, etc., etc. But I'll cut it there and stop rambling. As always, thank you all for watching, question everything, and have a nice night.